Okay, here we are back for part 1B of Civil Liberties 1 through 3. So we're going to start with the First Amendment, of course. We're going to go through the amendments, basically 1 through 10. But we start with the First Amendment, but we start with the first part of the First Amendment. Not only are there 5 parts to the First Amendment, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of press, and so on, we start with freedom of religion. So we start at the beginning, freedom of religion, but there's also 2 parts to freedom of religion. Excuse me. So if you look at the very beginning of the First Amendment, it's there on the right side. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Those are the 2 different things. So it has 2 parts. The first part is called the Establishment Clause. You can see it there before the comma. And then after the comma, you get the Free Exercise Clause. And we're going to have a case for each of those that are on our 15. And we're going to start just today. We're just going to do Establishment Clause today. And actually, we're not even going to finish Establishment Clause today. So the idea. So what does it really mean here? First of all, I think everybody can agree that it means Congress cannot establish a national religion. And remember, they're also recalling uh, what they had come from, and you can go all the way back, and it's perfect time period for us here at Thanksgiving time, all the way back. Remember, the Pilgrims came; they were separatists. They were escaping the religious persecution of the Church of England because they had a national religion, and they still had one. I think they still do. I think it's actually called a national religion still, the Anglican religion or the Church of England. But so they're remembering that, right? So part of the thing is Congress cannot establish a national religion. We all know that that's really part of it. But what else did they really mean here? And that's what the Establishment Clause jurisprudence is all about, is what does the Establishment Clause really mean? Okay? Does it mean government not favoring one religion over another? I think we could probably all agree that that would be the case. Does it prohibit any support at all? And then you've heard this phrase before, right? Wall of separation. Is there a giant wall there that stops any sort of relationship with religious establishments, or is the wall lower? Are there holes in the wall? Things like that, and that's what we're going to see with some of these cases that we talk about, some of the things that happen. And use that phrase again, wall of separation. Remember, you've probably heard that here and there. But just remember, when that's used, that phrase is not in the Constitution. As far as that, you already saw everything, all the wording in the Bill of Rights, in the First Amendment, that has to do with religion, and there's nothing about a wall. That term comes later. Okay, comes later. It comes in a Supreme Court justice's thought process, and it's been used before. So that's not exactly the case. So let's take a look and see what we're talking about. Okay, the biggest issues that we have had, and some of the ones that we still have to do with aid to parochial schools. Parochial means religious schools. So this is government aid and prayer in public schools. Those are the 2 big issues. And the case that we have to start with today is, and it's a case from our 15, is going to be about prayer in public schools. So just to give you an idea, supporters, and there is aid, there is government aid, there is public government aid, both national and state level, for religious schools. Okay, so that exists. The supporters of that say the aid does not favor any particular religion. And the aid is out there, that whether it's state-sponsored or national-sponsored aid, it's available to any. It's available to Catholic schools, Protestant schools, Islamic schools, Jewish schools. It's available. So that's what they say. Hey, it doesn't favor any particular religion, so it's okay. The critics of that say that while that may be true, the Catholic Church is by far, and it is by far, the largest system in the country of parochial schools. They get the most aid because they're the largest. So that means that the government aid favors the Catholic religion over anything else. That argument still goes on. We're going to talk about a case on Wednesday, the Thursday stuff. We'll talk about some of the things that still exist today, some of the issues with establishment, and some of the issues of free exercise. but we'll get there later on. Okay, so really what we're going to concentrate on today is school prayer. The case is, this is one of our 15, so you got to make sure we understand it. That's what our assignment is about this week. Engel versus Vitale from 1962, and it's New York. And what happened was New York wrote a prayer, essentially approved by the state. They have a state school board. I think it's called the Board of Regents or something like that. And they approved this prayer to be read, and it was part of the day. So this is the rules. Teachers will read this prayer every day in class before the start of school. The upshot of the case is, and you're going to read all about it and all that in the assignment. So just for our notes purposes, the upshot is it was unconstitutional because of this case for the state to write a prayer to be recited in New York State public schools. Of course, that's the issue, right? It's public schools. And the issue is why, right? We are, and that includes me, it's public school here. Public school is a product of government. So the rulings here, and in a variety of other cases, is that since the public school is the government, and if the government says, so the public school says, we're going to say a prayer in class, that amounts to the government supporting or advocating for that religion or any religion, because this prayer was what they call non-denominational. So, but still, that was advocating for religion, and the government can't do that. And again, the school is government, public school, right? Private schools do whatever they want. In fact, that's why a lot of parents send their children to private religious schools so they can be active and religious and all of that. So this next one you do not even have to know. So I'm just giving you an idea that there was another case the next year, because this stuff comes in pieces. The Engel case, just make sure you understand, the Engel case incorporated the Establishment Clause. And I should have that in there, but make sure you write that down. The Engel versus Vitale case, our big case here for our first thing for this week, incorporates the Establishment Clause. Okay? And then so the next year, so there's more issues, of course. The next year, Pennsylvania could not mandate a daily Bible reading in schools, and they had done that. So another case comes up, goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court says, yep, that amounts to essentially the same thing. We're going to use the Engel idea here. That amounts to establishment. Okay. So the last thing is just a couple of things that might starting to sound familiar, right? The idea is government sponsored, either directly or indirectly. Directly is like the Engel case, right? The case we've got, the school, the public school mandating you say a prayer. The teacher says it, and the kids are supposed to recite it every day, but they don't have to. That's not the issue. Directly or indirectly, that's the key issue. So that was pretty direct. So there's also indirect. Okay, for instance, school-sponsored prayer at graduation. That's an issue. Student-led prayer before football games. That's an issue. Moment of silence for voluntary prayer. That's an issue. Guess what? They're all unconstitutional. They've all been found to be unconstitutional by violating the Establishment Clause. Now, some of those things might go, wow, don't we do that? And the idea here is we have to understand what's happening. The school does not sponsor a prayer at graduation. You will not hear a prayer at graduation. Okay? That used to happen. Student-led prayers, even student-led prayers, we're talking about over the loudspeaker before a football game. You will not hear that. If you do hear that, somebody's doing it wrong. Okay? And so this one's the most familiar, right? This moment of silence. We do it. We do it every day, right? When you're in school, you hear Mr. Bass, right? At the end of the day with a moment of silence for reflection or whatever it is, right? The law, and the case was from Alabama, right? Alabama case had a law that said we will have a moment of silence for voluntary prayer, and that was what they were supposed to say over the loudspeaker, a moment of silence for voluntary prayer. That's unconstitutional. That's what the law said, and that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said that's unconstitutional. So they changed their law, and the Georgia law is the same way. A moment of silence or reflection, or moment of silence for reflection on our goals and whatever for the day, right? They really mean for voluntary prayer, but they can't say it in the law. So they took it out of the law, and now it's okay. Whether they want that to mean whatever it means, that's what they did it for. But as long as you take that out, then it's constitutional. So we have it. And I'm not saying that we expect or that Mr. Bass expects or the school board expects you to pray, but they took the words out. The state did, and the other states do this that have these things. They took those words out, which makes it constitutional. If you had the words for voluntary prayer in there, it would be unconstitutional. Okay, so that's it for this part for today. We'll continue with Establishment Clause, a little bit of Establishment Clause on Wednesday, Thursday, plus Free Exercise Clause, and we'll have a couple more cases to deal with, talk about in our assignments. All right, until then, work on this, get that assignment done, and we'll see you again on